The Misfits is a 1961 drama western that was written by Arthur Miller and it was directed by John Huston. It stars Clark Gable, Marilyn Monroe, and Montgomery Clift. The supporting cast features Thelma Ritter, Eli Wallach, and Kevin McCarthy. And the story's basically a story about a newly divorced woman, played by Marilyn Monroe, and the time she spends in Reno and northern Nevada with her landlady friend Isabella Steers, played by Thelma Ritter, and with the old school cowboy, played by Clark Gable. Then there was the cowboy's friend and tow truck driver, played by Eli Wallach. Rounding out the group is the rodeo-riding, bronc-busting friend, played by Montgomery Clift. And the movie is about their time that they spend together in Dayton, Nevada, and the western Nevada desert. The production of the film was just terrible. It was 100 degrees while they were doing the filming, and this just complicated everything. It made it completely unbearable for the cast and crew. Now, it was known that John Huston was often late to the set after spending the nights out just gambling money away. Clark Gable basically took it all in stride. Clark Gable just simply waited with his script open to the page that was being shot that day, and he was often asked if the lateness actually upset him. He said, "No, it really doesn't. It doesn't drive me mad." He stated that it would be better if he was here on time, but I'm getting paid pretty handsomely for this project anyway. They also had to wait for Marilyn Monroe to show up on the set. And Clark Gable just flat out got bored with all the waiting, and he opted to do a lot of his own stunts, and that included being dragged by a truck traveling 30 miles an hour. This kept his time occupied. Now, United Artists executives were really unhappy with the rough cut of the film, so they had John Huston and the producer Frank Taylor and the writer Arthur Miller agreed to reshoot several scenes and to rewrite them. Now, Clark Gable had script approval and he rejected that idea. He just flat out told them no. There were other disagreements of the final cut that resulted in the elimination of shots of Marilyn Monroe's naked breast from a bedroom scene. Now, Clark Gable's close friend, John Lee Mahan, really tried to dissuade him from taking on this film. He insisted to him that this part required a better actor, somebody like Spencer Tracy. And it ended up that Gable actually felt out of place, since Marilyn Monroe, Montgomery Clift, Eli Wallach, they all practiced method acting, which was like an alien religion to him. Now, one of the very most difficult scenes was a 5-minute exchange between Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift that the director, John Huston, wanted to shoot in one long take, the longest single take in his entire career. Nobody believed that the two actors, who were absolutely notorious for their problems remembering lines, could pull it off. Marilyn requested that all the strangers be removed from the set beforehand, and she also asked that nobody stand right in her line of sight. Each actor was so concerned about pulling this off that they actually did in 6 tries, and they gave John Huston 2 perfect takes to work with. Now, there were a lot of people that noticed a change in Clark Gable's voice, and it led a lot of people to speculate that he had lung cancer at the time of his death. You see, Gable smoked up to 4 packs of cigarettes a day for 30 years. And when you watch this movie, I did notice this, and I knew there was something completely different about the way his portrayal was. And after I did research on it and noticed these comments about his voice, I'm pretty sure that's what I picked up on as being wrong with his delivery. It wasn't bad, it was just different. Now, Marilyn Monroe was originally terrified at the thought of working with Clark Gable. You see, as a child growing up in foster homes, she had slept with Clark Gable's picture under her pillow and fantasized that he was her father. The night before their very first scene together, she couldn't sleep without a large dose of Nebutal. As a result, she was 2 hours late getting to the set. When she apologized to Gable, he simply said, "You're not late, honey," and he led her aside to talk. Throughout this entire film, he treated her with the utmost courtesy. Now, the horse roping scenes were hard for Montgomery Clift. When the crew actually forgot to have him put on gloves during the first few takes, he had to hold onto the ropes with his bare hands. And for the rest of the shoot, his hands were just bloody and raw inside the gloves that they provided him. Now, the one time that Clark Gable got out of shape on this film and actually blew up at the director, John Huston, was during the filming of the horse roping scene. And this was because John Huston insisted on another take, even after Clark Gable's stunt double had been injured on the previous take. Clark Gable just walked off the set in disgust. Now, initially, Clark Gable failed the physical test to get insurance for the film. He later passed a second physical test after being ordered to stay in bed for a week, and he was to do this without smoking or drinking. He ended up celebrating the passed test on the second attempt with a bottle of brandy and a large cigar. Now, production was shut down in late August when the film exceeded its budget. It took 2 weeks of meetings with United Artists executives in Los Angeles and New York to get things back on track, while the other actors in the film competed to win John Huston's approval. Clark Gable saw him more as a rival. Both were known for their masculine escapades of drinking, hunting, and womanizing. The older Gable, settled into his 5th marriage, was at times baffled and annoyed at the director's carousing during filming. And he got really annoyed with the habit of him losing large sums of money at the gambling tables and then bragging about it the next day. As shooting progressed, Marilyn Monroe became increasingly dependent upon pills. She had prescriptions flown in every other day by her Los Angeles doctors, and she actually received additional medication from local doctors. She was taking about 3 times the normal dosage of sleeping pills than she should have been. The pills ended up leaving her disoriented and unsteady on her feet and incoherent some of the time. And they also led to really wild mood swings. Now, one of the contributors to this was that during the filming, Marilyn Monroe's marriage to Arthur Miller was falling apart. And a lot of this was partly because of disagreements over the scripts and her feelings of betrayal over how he had written her character. She also felt that he had actually turned John Huston against her, leading him to treat her like an idiot. Within a few weeks of the production's start, they were actually staying in separate suites of the hotel, and they actually stopped speaking by August. They basically used Marilyn Monroe's acting coach to serve as an intermediary between the two. Now, Marilyn wasn't the only problem child on this set. Montgomery Clift had his own struggles too. They actually had in the contract of this movie to have a doctor on call 24 hours a day for Marilyn Monroe and Montgomery Clift. And this was because of the extreme health problems that they were experiencing due to alcohol and drugs. Quite a few members of this set were just a mess. And to finish it off, Clark Gable dies of a heart attack right after the production ended. And actually, on the last day of filming, he was talking about Marilyn Monroe, and he said, "Goodness, I'm glad this picture's finished. She's damn near gonna give me a heart attack." And of this, he was referring to the unexpected nude scene in the bedroom. It was on the very next day that Clark Gable suffered a severe coronary thrombosis and died 10 days later at the age of 59. Marilyn Monroe felt absolutely terrible about his death, and she blamed herself for it. But you have to note that Clark Gable was already in poor health when filming began. He had been a chain smoker since he was in his mid-teens, and until just recently, he had been a heavy drinker. And it was twice over the past decade he had suffered severe chest pains, which could have been heart attacks that went undiagnosed. Now, this movie was actually on television the night that Montgomery Clift died, in July of 1966. His live-in personal secretary, Lorenzo James, had asked Clift if he wanted to watch it, and Clift's response was, "Absolutely not." And these were the last words that he spoke to anyone. He was found the very next morning after suffering a heart attack during the night. Now, there were high expectations, given the star power of the writer, director, and the actors in this movie. Everybody thought that it would be the ultimate motion picture before its release. The Misfits failed to meet expectations at the box office, and it has historically been referred to as the box office disaster of its day. The critical response to it was better, and despite the on-set difficulties that all the actors had, they delivered performances that were really superb. Some of the critics thought that Gable's performance was actually his finest. I like this movie. It's not in my top 10, but it's still a fun watch. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll continue to chase the classics.